What's up, guys? This is Computer Science 2 on the second to last full week, and then we have our e-learning and so on. Today, I'm not going to recap the project. If you want to recap, which is perfectly fine, if you do, you should look at this post. In fact, I'm going to bump this to the top because a lot of people will need these links. Here's a video where I just went over like the basic structure of the project, and trying to document whenever I move something or change it. I will usually say, you know, this has been moved, this has been changed, here's where I added stuff, because I know already I have too many things on the stream, and if you guys are looking through it, you might be thrown off. So usually if I do something like this, I'll make a comment, as you should, in your code as well. If you want to recap, click that. Today I'm going to go over some tips, and mostly general tips. I'm not going to say like, in line 37, use this code, although we might get into a few specifics. My first tip is to use your resources. I know it sounds simple, but this quarter you have these videos from me, like this one, which is a big recap. You have small ones, like on November 9th, I made one with just a tip about the rectangles, because people were having issues when you draw the walls or when you draw the paddle. You have to use this rectangle class. It's actually the initialization for the rectangle, which is good because we make initialization functions for our things too. And it needs certain parameters. So here's an example. Here's one that I did wrong and I changed, but in the video I just go over how to do that in general. So use your resources. You have these from me. You also have code from me. Here's my version. Here's a variation. Here's another variation. Here's another. So you can look at those and see what I did, maybe copy a little bit, maybe get inspiration, maybe see what you like or don't like, or even just get a general idea of what the possibilities are. Then, obviously, most of all, this playlist right here is the tutorial we started with. And I kind of found this because some of you guys were looking on YouTube in Q1 and finding some tutorials that I didn't like. So I thought, well, let's find a good one. Let's show them how it's done. Let's see the good stuff. And this tutorial is very good. And this guy spins a video at first just explaining the idea. What are we thinking of? What are the parameters? What are the rules? And he doesn't even write code until video 2. And then he writes the borders for the screen, just setting it up. And then the next one, he does the ball and the paddle and bouncing it around. And then the final one, which I didn't even show in class, he gets into making a computer player and not doing it in a simple way, but doing it in sort of a show-off way to use other stuff. And if you want to look at that, that's great. But these three are super useful, and even if you put it all together, it's under an hour, so it's not like some giant ordeal to get through. If you really are just pressed for time and you don't have them all, I'd watch just 2 and 3. Now, okay, use your resources. The reason why is because you are not alone. You're not like, you didn't get the assignment to make Pong and then you just have to do it, okay? Some of you guys are following each step, doing one thing at a time, and that's awesome. But some of you guys were like recently trying to get caught up and trying to like do it all at once. You don't have to do that. Please don't even think of that, because it's not going to work. But if you look at my examples, look at the tutorial, maybe look up a specific thing or ask me a specific thing or ask your classmates, you could just like do step 1. Okay, in the grade book it says screen and borders. That's a grade. Then it says paddle and control. That's a grade. Then it says ball and collision. That's a grade. And that's the big one just because it's the 3rd step, because it's like finalizing a working version. But it's not that much harder, really. In fact, you can do it in a different order. Some people did the walls and then the ball and then the paddle 3rd. That's fine. It works. Whatever you got to do it one thing at a time. Don't try to make the paddle and the ball and the walls in your first step, because you won't know what's going on or what works or what doesn't. And that brings me to my second tip. Okay, the first one was use your resources, follow their lead, take it one thing at a time. My second tip is to, once this loads, hopefully, is to do this. Hit run when you open up your project, when you're about to close the project, when you change anything. Hit run all the time. You can never do it too much. It is your test of like, is this working or not? Okay, so when I fire this up, I'm going to hit run just to see, okay, wait, what version am I on? What is the rule here? Does it work? And this one that I clicked, I believe, is the base version that has a single player, 3 walls, 1 ball, and mouse controls. So yep, that's the case. Ball's probably too slow. I should probably speed it up just so you don't have to wait a dang second or two to bring it back around. But this is the base version. It bounces off the walls. It bounces off the paddle. It moves at a nice slow pace. Okay. Hitting run was important because what if I changed something and got an error? I wouldn't know if it was the change, or maybe it was wrong before I even started. Maybe I left it in a bad state yesterday, and now I don't know if the problem was the thing I just did today or something from before. Just hit run all the time, before a change, after a change. It will give you so much feedback, because sometimes you get an error in the window here with red underlines under your code if there's something wrong, or green underlines if there's something that just doesn't get used. But not always. Sometimes a line will look okay, and then when you run it, it is not doing what you wanted to do. So for example, one small thing was the rectangles. Pygame uses rectangles a lot, and it's a key part of many of their functions and modules. And for example, you see the rect right here. This is a subset of the draw module, and it's lowercase. But the rect over here is a class. It is the rectangle class, and you're initializing a rectangle based on the arguments you send. And if this was lowercase, it wouldn't give you a red underline, but it wouldn't work either. The only way you'd know is by hitting run. Okay, that was the top. So is it going to have no border on top? Or is it going to have no border on anything? Yeah, it's not, because it's oh, hang on. You can't see the bottom right. It says module object is not callable because it's treating this as a module instead of a class. So I'm going to have to, boom, hit run again. Hopefully it works. Hopefully I didn't ruin it forever. Boom, now we're back in business. I always think of that line from Jurassic Park, Mr. Hammond, I think we're back in business, right before the raptor shows up. No. That is so key. Okay, if you do that, if you hit run every time you do anything, you will be just in tune with the project. You'll know what works and what doesn't, and what changes made the difference and what changes didn't make a difference. In fact, that's one big part of it, is like if you change something and you hit run and it doesn't make a difference, then that's sending you down a path, and you know, okay, what the heck? Like if you changed a color and then you hit run and it didn't actually show up in a different color, you're like, oh, what's going on here? Maybe this variable isn't being used right, or maybe the color isn't doing what I thought it did. Something like that is super useful, okay? It's not just, do you see an error? It's not just, did it work? It is what happens. When you hit run, you get to see what happens, or what doesn't happen, or what changes, or you know, if something you thought was going to make a difference didn't, or if something weird happens that you just didn't expect, like if you change the ball but it ends up affecting the paddle, then you're like, what the heck is this? Is it one function that asks the ball for its position that ends up giving it a weird result and ends up affecting the other stuff? That's always super important to know. Okay, so if you're going to make a small change, do it and hit run. If you're going to make a big change and like go in a new path, for example, I did my basic version and then I said, oh, let's do one with multiple balls, and then I said, oh, let's do one with keyboard controls, and then, oh, let's do one with 2-player. Instead of that, then you would go here, fork. Okay, fork is often used on other people's projects. If you look at somebody else's thing and then you like say, oh, I'm going to do my version, you might use fork. But it's also very useful for your own projects. If you fork your own thing, which like this basic Pong, I forked it 3 times to make one with a variation, one with another variation, one with another. It's a way to say, okay, this thing that works is not going to change, but some other thing is going to be experimented on in its own little universe. Okay, because as a sort of concept, you want your thing to work all the time, right? If you make a change, you want it to work. You don't want to have to like go through several versions that don't in order to end up with something that works in the end. It's very like disconnected from reality. It means you have to keep this in your head, but the stuff on screen is not happening. And yeah, sometimes that's the way it has to go, but you'd rather keep one that works, take your other thing in a new direction, and maybe it, you know, flips back in, or, you know, the timelines rejoin or something. But you should imagine it as sort of an evolution. In real evolution, every organism has to live. You know, the genes can't say, look, we're going to try a few that don't work, but then 500 years down the line, it's going to, you know, reproduce. Every child has to work, even if it's not quite there yet. If you're not quite making a wing or an eye or whatever, every subsequent generation has to be surviving to the next one. And then you can kind of think of that as your project. Every version can be a little bit different. Like on mine, I made one with keyboard controls, and that doesn't actually matter a whole lot. It's the same single player version as first, but I did it as an intermediate step because I think, okay, eventually I'm going to do 2-player keyboard controls where one guy's using up and down and the other's using W and S. And so I didn't try to do that all at once. I said, let's do keyboard with 1 player, changing nothing except how the thing moves. Then I got that, and I go, okay, got it, locked in, it works. Next generation will be to make another one and move that. Which, by the way, that's by far the hardest one I've done because the collision is more complicated when you're having different things bounce in different directions. So, that's another thing. Okay, let's take a look at that because it is more complicated, and that brings me to my third tip. Let me take a look at the chat, see if there's anybody asking questions in the chat. I always want to make sure I look over there. I don't see any yet. So here's my third version. If I hit run, you'll see what I'm talking about. Or not, and we'll figure out what's wrong. But, you know, following my own advice, hitting run every time I open one. Great. We got this one moving with W and S. We got this one moving with up and down. And the ball is not there. I think it went off screen before I even noticed, before it even loaded fully maybe. Let me try to run it again and see if we see the ball. I'm not even going to try to catch it with the paddles. I'm just going to see if it's there. Okay, it is there. Maybe the first time it appeared in a weird spot, or maybe it was there and I just didn't see. How does this one work? This one, they are not going in a random direction like my one version. It's just going the same every time. So maybe I just didn't see it. I'm thinking about adding a little countdown, like, you know, like in a fighting game when it's like 3, 2, 1, go. I might add that to the beginning, and then you won't have to worry about getting caught off guard. Or I could look and see how real Pong works. I don't even know. I've never played real Pong, or at least not recently. Does it start in the middle? Does it start on one of the paddles? I think it does, because it's sort of a you know, abstract version of tennis, but I don't know. The third thing that I was going to say as your tip is this idea of you want your code to be readable, and you want it to make sense, and you want it to be nicely arranged, but it's not for the reason you think. Okay, sometimes people talk about, well, you got to make your code readable and put comments and use variable names that describe what they're doing because other people are going to look at it. You know, you might be working for a company, and then this project's going to be handed off to somebody else in the future. Or you might be working for a group project in school, and you might have other people, you know, add their own modules. That is true, but that's not the real reason, okay? Also, it's going to be graded by me, so you want it to make sense to me when I look. But that's not the real reason. Okay, the real reason you want to make your code readable is for yourself. Because let's say you worked on this a couple days ago, you pop it open, you want to be able to see, what the heck was I doing? What was that? What is this stuff going on? And often you don't, okay? Often you fire this up and you're like, what was I doing here? What the heck is this line? And so what I should do is add more comments. Like, I've got comments at the top, but I should add a few more. Like on this part, I think what I was doing was sometimes the ball would go off screen and then come back, and I was trying to make it just stop. But that sucks. There's got to be a better way. And I should comment on it. I should probably make it a separate function. Speaking of that, I love making things into separate functions. If you look at the update function on the tutorial from the guy in the videos, he does not have it like this at all. He has one show rather than breaking it up into hide version, show version, and he has the collision and the move happen inside of the same chunk. So I made extra stuff, and that's my style, because I want to look at this and see like English words. Okay, hide, check, collision, move, show. Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's almost like doing comments, except they're you know, contained in the names. That makes sense to me because I look at that and I know what happens in one order, and then I could look at one of these and be like, oh, what does the hide function do? Blah, blah, blah. And then get like, you know, it's almost like these are like footnotes about what the function does. If you like that, you can do that. Some people, you know, copied my version. Some people copied the version in the tutorial. And I have to say, I like mine, but of course I like mine because it's mine. If you have a different way of doing it, you should do that. For example, I was looking at one and I was thinking to myself, like, when we make the new X and new Y, why don't you just use them for the move? You know, if you had these in the same function, you could just say self.x equals new X. I I know why I didn't do that, because I have it in separate functions, but the guy in the initial thing, he could have done so. It doesn't matter. It is literally the same result, and nobody would ever know. But when you are reading code, you want it to make sense, okay? Not for other people. Not for, like, theoretical teammates or me grading. You want it to make sense for yourself, because you are the one who's looking at it most of the time. And that's important. Okay, be nice to your future self. Be nice to, like, you know, if this is Thursday and you're going to log in again on Monday, be nice to the Monday version of yourself who's going to look at this and spend 5 minutes going, what the heck was I thinking when I made this dang line? You know, just tell him or tell her. Be nice to that future version of yourself. Anyway, those are my 3 big tips. 1 is use the resources you have, my videos, the tutorials, the tips. 2 is run all the time, before changes, after changes. They give you lots of info. And 3 is make it readable, not for other people, but so you can fire it up and see what's going on. Okay? Now, some specific tips. Let's get into some specific things that people are missing or that they need. Number 1 is that rect capitalization that I was talking about. I know it's weird. You can't just control F and find and replace, because some of the recs are lowercase and some are upper. They still haven't fixed the bells. It's like off by 1.5 minutes. I think when they changed it for daylight savings, they were just kind of doing it on the fly and not really. Who knows? I don't know what happened. I don't even know how the bells are set. Is it on a computer? Is it on a little, digital clock? I don't know. Anyway, this is one thing that a lot of people have a problem with. When you draw the rectangle, you are using something that's a subset of the draw module, but when you call up and initialize a rectangle in the first place, you use a capital because it's a class. Once you get used to it, it's fine, but a lot of people have that, and like that's the only thing, and if they fix that, they'd get something when they hit run. But they might not know because they haven't hit run enough. Okay, another thing is when you are testing different lines or testing changes, use the comment to comment them out and segregate that line. This is the mouse move, and like I said, this is the version that does the keyboard stuff. If you're the left player, then it's K or it's W and S. If you're the right player, it's up and down. But I kept that line in there because this is a fork of a previous version, and I thought, let's just comment it out. If I want to, sort of finalize this and publish it or something, I would remove that maybe, but it's only one line. Who cares? You don't get points for the fewest amount of lines. A lot of stuff that you do that makes it better doesn't make it shorter, and that's okay. In theory, yes, there are times when you want to make the file size smaller or something, but we're not there. We're not even close. If this thing is 100 lines or 200, it's not going to affect the bottom line. We're not like printing these on physical disks or anything. Another thing is how can I say this? The idea of classes. Okay, in quarter 1, some of you guys really did a great job on knowing how to use a class, and you made one for the player or the card or the dice or something. If that's the case, great, keep it up. But if not, really put some effort into learning how classes work, and you might go to CodeHS and do their section on it. In fact, what the heck, if you do, show me, I'll give you extra credit. But you might also just see how it works in terms of the organization. Like if I click the little minus here, then that sucks up everything that was in the class just to make it visually accessible. Like you can minimize this and read the rest, or you can unroll this and see it all. But you can look at these little lines, and like this shows that everything to the right of this line is a subset of the class. Everything to the right of this line is a subset of the module, or the method of the class. And just get this idea in your mind of subsets of methods, of functions. And there are different ways to arrange it visually to make it look nicer, but it's really a mental thing. Like once you get this idea of, okay, the ball class has certain things, and when I make an instance of the ball class, it inherits those things. And then I can ask, like, if I have one ball, that's fine. But if I have multiple, I could say ball1.show or ball2.show or whatever. And it would be using their version of this thing. Like those two balls would be, siblings. They might not be doing exactly the same thing, but they would inherit all of this when they are created. Looking at it, that this is ugly, by the way. I really got to redo this, even though it works. This works perfectly fine. I really want to rearrange this because it's hard to read. It's hard to understand. It's hard to know, like, if something's wrong, what the heck is causing it. So I really got to redo this to make it prettier. That will be my goal for myself. And speaking of classes, that brings to mind the capitalization thing. You should capitalize your classes. You don't have to, but you should. Because it'll let you know whenever you see something capital, you'll know it's a class. One you make or one you don't, it's just a good habit. And, I'm getting up to 30 minutes, so I'm going to end this video. But as I've been doing, I'm just going to continue looking at each person's individual project and trying to help whatever they need individually. I've been making some videos and doing some comments, and as long as we are making progress, we're going to be fine. If you do a little bit today, a little bit the next day, I promise you'll be fine. If you do nothing and then try to turn it in at the end, that's when you won't. Okay? If you're starting from scratch, if you're somebody who's really trying to get caught up and you watch this whole thing, do the screen and borders first. That's it. Forget everything else. Just do this guy. Then, once you get that to work, which you'll know by hitting run, then pick. You can do the ball or the paddle, but just one. Get it to do its thing. Then the other. At each step, hitting run, testing it out, sending it to me, doing all your stuff, you will be fine. Thanks.